The television studio was already tense before the cameras turned on. Not chaotic, not loud, just tense in the way that happens when everyone in the room knows something might go wrong, and no one's sure who will pull the trigger. Denzel Washington and Jasmine Crockett were scheduled to appear on a special broadcast discussing leadership across generations. It had been pitched as a respectful conversation between an elder statesman of Hollywood and a rising political figure. But that was just the version the public saw. Behind the scenes, there were emails, conditions, and warnings. Denzel Washington had only agreed to appear if the discussion remained substantive and respectful. That meant no grandstanding, no political theater, and no attempts to use him as a prop. Jasmine Crockett's team had agreed, or at least they said they had. But just minutes before they walked onto the set, one of Crockett's aides was overheard saying, "Let her take him down a peg. These old Hollywood types need to learn." And Denzel's longtime assistant heard every word. When they finally stepped onto the stage, the applause was warm and genuine. People were clapping for two accomplished figures, not knowing what was coming. Denzel walked with that unmistakable dignity, taking his seat with practiced ease. Jasmine followed, confident and ready. The moderator began with introductions. "Tonight, we have Academy Award winner Denzel Washington and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett discussing leadership, legacy, and the future of America." It started cordially enough. They discussed their backgrounds, their motivations. But then Jasmine shifted the tone. She said, "Mr. Washington, with all due respect, your generation of celebrities has been largely silent while America burns. Where's your voice when we need it?" Denzel's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He responded quietly, "Young lady, I've been serving my community for 40 years. Building schools, funding scholarships, mentoring youth. Just because I don't announce it at press conferences doesn't mean it's not happening." Jasmine pressed harder. "But silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Your platform could change minds, but you choose comfort over conscience." The audience grew uncomfortable. This wasn't the respectful dialogue they'd expected. Denzel leaned back slightly. "Congresswoman, I've learned something in my 69 years. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest. And confusing volume with virtue is a young person's mistake." Jasmine's tone turned sharp. "So you're calling me unwise? Typical of your generation, dismissing younger voices as naive while you cling to outdated notions of respectability." That's when Denzel's demeanor changed. He sat forward, his voice still calm, but carrying unmistakable authority. "Outdated? I marched with my parents in the civil rights movement. I've spent decades lifting up our community. What you call outdated respectability, I call dignity. Something you might consider." Jasmine wouldn't back down. "Dignity? While people suffer, while democracy crumbles, your dignity is just another word for cowardice." The word hung in the air like a slap. Denzel stood up slowly. At 69, he still commanded the room with his presence. He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke with the kind of gravity that made audiences believe he was truly the characters he portrayed. "That's enough." The two words filled the studio. Not shouted, not angry, just final. "Now, before we witness what happened next in this explosive confrontation, I need to tell you something. What you're about to see is exactly why mainstream media doesn't want you to know these stories exist. They bury them, edit them, pretend they never happened. But we're here, exposing the truth they desperately want hidden. If you believe in real, unfiltered truth, if you're tired of being fed sanitized versions of events, then hit that subscribe button right now. Don't wait until the end, because what's coming next will blow your mind. Subscribe now and join the thousands who refuse to be lied to anymore. Trust me, after you see what Denzel does next, you'll understand why they tried so hard to make this disappear." Denzel continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. "You want to talk about cowardice? Cowardice is attacking someone's character because they don't perform their service the way you demand. Cowardice is mistaking rudeness for righteousness. Jasmine tried to interject. I'm not being rude. I'm being honest. No, Denzel interrupted, his voice rising slightly for the first time. You're being disrespectful. And I've lived too long and worked too hard to sit here and let you question my commitment to my people. He turned to the audience, many of whom were his generation. This is what's wrong with discourse today. It's not enough to serve. You have to serve the right way, say the right things, post on the right websites. Well, I'm from a generation that believed actions spoke louder than words. Several audience members began applauding. Denzel continued, now addressing Jasmine directly. You know what I did last week? I paid for 20 young men to go to college. Black men from neighborhoods everyone's forgotten. You know what I didn't do? Hold a press conference about it. Jasmine's confidence began to waver. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Denzel said. Because real service doesn't need publicity. Real change happens in silence, in consistency, in showing up year after year without applause. He stepped closer to her, his presence filling the space. You want to lecture me about courage? I've been Black in America for 69 years. I've faced things you've only read about. I've broken barriers you walk through freely. And I did it with dignity, with grace, with respect for those who came before me. Jasmine stood frozen, unable to respond. Denzel's voice softened but remained firm. You're a brilliant young woman. You've achieved things at your age I couldn't have dreamed of. But brilliance without wisdom is dangerous. And wisdom recognizes that everyone fighting for justice doesn't have to fight the same way. He looked around the studio. I'm tired of this. Tired of being told my generation failed because we don't tweet our every thought. Tired of being called complicit because we choose strategy over spectacle. Tired of young people who mistake our discretion for disengagement. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. You want to know what I stand for? Denzel asked. I stand for the single mother who cleans offices at night so her kids can have better. I stand for the young man choosing between gangs and grades. I stand for the grandmother raising her grandchildren on Social Security. And I serve them quietly, consistently, without needing your approval or acknowledgement. Jasmine finally found her voice, but it was small. Mr. Washington, I didn't mean. Yes, you did, he said simply. You meant to embarrass me, to paint me as out of touch, to score points with people who think progress only looks one way. Well, congratulations. You've shown everyone exactly what's wrong with our discourse. He headed for the exit, then stopped and turned back. One more thing, Congresswoman. That school I mentioned building? It's in your district. Those scholarships I fund, they go to your constituents. That mentoring program? It serves the very people you claim I've abandoned. The difference between us is I don't need you to know about it. I just need it to work. He looked at her one last time. When you've served as long as I have, when you've changed as many lives, when you've carried as many people's hopes, then you can lecture me about courage. Until then, young lady, learn the difference between volume and value, between performance and purpose, between being seen and being effective. He walked off with the same dignity he'd entered with. Jasmine stood on stage, frozen, tears forming in her eyes. The studio erupted in applause, not for drama, but for truth delivered with the kind of authority only decades of genuine service can provide. What happened next would spark a national conversation about respect, service, and the danger of dismissing elder wisdom. After Denzel's exit, the studio remained in stunned silence for several moments. Jasmine stood alone on stage, visibly shaken, struggling to process what had just happened. The moderator tried to salvage the broadcast, but the damage was done. Jasmine finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I need a moment. She walked off stage, leaving the audience in uncomfortable silence. An elderly woman in the audience stood up. That young woman needed to hear that. We've become too accepting of disrespect disguised as progress. Others nodded in agreement. The audience, mostly people over 60, began sharing their own experiences. "My granddaughter talks to me the same way," one man said. "Like my years of experience mean nothing because I don't use social media. They call us outdated," another woman added. "But we built the foundations they stand on." Meanwhile, backstage, Denzel was surrounded by production staff, many with tears in their eyes. A veteran cameraman shook his hand. "Mr. Washington, I'm 67 years old. Thank you for saying what we've all been feeling. These young folks think we're irrelevant, but we're still here, still contributing." Denzel nodded graciously. "We all serve in our own way. The tragedy is when we forget to honor each other's service." In her dressing room, Jasmine was coming to terms with what had transpired. Her aide tried to comfort her. "He was out of line." "No," Jasmine interrupted. "He was right. I was so focused on making a point that I forgot to show respect. I became exactly what I claimed to fight against, someone who dismisses others based on assumptions." Within hours, the confrontation was everywhere. Hashtag Denzel Speaks Truth became the top trending topic among older social media users. Denzel, who rarely used social media, had his son post a simple statement: "Respect is the foundation of all meaningful dialogue." "Tonight, I defended not just myself, but everyone whose quiet service is dismissed as inadequate. We don't all fight the same way, but we all fight." The response from older Americans was overwhelming. A 72-year-old veteran wrote, "I've served my community for 50 years without fanfare. Tonight, Denzel Washington reminded America that quiet service still matters." A retired teacher posted, "We're told we're out of touch, but we're the ones staffing food banks, volunteering at hospitals, raising grandchildren. Thank you, Denzel, for defending our dignity." Surprisingly, Jasmine posted a lengthy, heartfelt apology that night. "Tonight, I learned a valuable lesson about humility and respect. I went on that stage thinking I was speaking truth to power, but instead, I was speaking ignorance to wisdom. Mr. Washington has contributed more to our community than I could have imagined, all without seeking credit or praise. I apologize not just to him, but to every elder I've dismissed as out of touch without taking time to understand their contributions. True progress honors the past while building the future. Tonight, I failed at that. I will do better." The apology was well received, particularly among older viewers who appreciated her willingness to admit error. 3 days later, something unexpected happened. Denzel reached out to Jasmine privately. They met for coffee, away from cameras. Later, Jasmine shared, "Mr. Washington showed me more grace than I deserved. He spent 2 hours teaching me about the power of quiet service, about the civil rights leaders who worked behind the scenes, about the importance of building rather than just speaking. I left that coffee shop a different leader than I entered." The impact of the confrontation rippled through society. Younger activists began reaching out to older community leaders, seeking wisdom rather than dismissing experience. Intergenerational dialogues increased across the country. Churches and community centers hosted wisdom and energy forums, bringing together older and younger leaders to share perspectives respectfully. 6 months later, Denzel and Jasmine appeared together at a community event in her district, at the school he had helped build. They spoke about bridging generational divides and the importance of mutual respect. Denzel said, "That night on television wasn't my proudest moment, but if it helped start conversations about honoring each other's service, then perhaps it served a purpose." Jasmine added, "Mr. Washington taught me that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice. It's about being the most effective one. Our elders have wisdom we ignore at our peril." A year later, at the NAACP Image Awards, Jasmine presented Denzel with a Lifetime Achievement Award. In her introduction, she said, "This man corrected me on national television, and it was the greatest gift he could have given me. He reminded all of us, that respect isn't old-fashioned. It's eternal. That service doesn't need publicity to be real. That wisdom earned through decades of experience deserves our attention, not our dismissal." When Denzel accepted the award, he spoke about the importance of intergenerational respect. We need the energy of youth and the wisdom of age. We need the passion of new voices and the perspective of experienced ones. But most of all, we need to remember that we're all on the same side, just fighting in different ways. The confrontation that began with disrespect had transformed into a model for bridging generational divides. "That's enough" became more than just two words spoken in frustration. They became a rallying cry for mutual respect, for honoring different forms of service, for recognizing that progress doesn't require dismissing the past. Denzel Washington didn't just confront Jasmine Crockett that night. He confronted a culture that had forgotten to honor its elders, that mistook volume for value, that confused disrespect with progress. And in doing so, he reminded America that true strength speaks softly but carries the weight of genuine service. Sometimes the most powerful moments aren't scripted. They're when someone finally says what needs to be said, and when someone else is wise enough to listen.